It's not the house that's haunted. It's your son.
What's your favorite scary movie?
What's the boogeyman?
As a matter of fact, it was.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to episode 9 of the Slashers in Sync podcast. Joining me, as always, is my co-host, my life partner, my number one, Marvalous.
Hi.
I come from the era of like hype intro, so
I know. I'm still not used to it. Even off camera or off recording. Still not used to it.
Well, you guys read the title, and we're going to be discussing the First Omen. We were going to make this like an Instagram reel / TikTok video, but we wanted to go ahead and discuss it in a longer format. I don't think this episode will be too long, but we do want to center it around the First Omen.
Yeah.
Yeah, so be on the lookout for that. And for other films, like possibly even Immaculate and Imaginary, please follow us on Instagram if you want to hear our thoughts on that, because we'll probably end up reviewing those over on the Instagram channel Slash and Sync.
Sync, yeah.
Yeah, so if you said that in sync.
Like unironically and untimed, I promise we didn't do like a 1, 2, 3 or anything like that. I just looked over at him and apparently the words came out of our mouths at exactly the same time. It's gross, I know.
Yeah.
Anyway, I digress. Back to the movie.
We spent too much time with each other.
I'm always at work. What the fuck are you talking about?
A lot of hype around this movie.
A lot.
What's funny though is the box office doesn't really show it. It's like at I think 35.8 million for the box office as of this recording. It'll probably go up by the time this episode goes out, but this really isn't like Conjuring, numbers. This isn't Halloween Ends numbers.
It's not breaking bank. It's not going crazy. Like, word's going around, don't get me wrong, but no one, like, the numbers aren't really showing for it. I guess it basically broke even, right?
As of right now, yeah, because the 30 million was the budget, which pretty decent budget. It's kind of like in line with like a Conjuring film budget. I mean, it's not like a 5 million or 10 million like a Terrifier film, but it's also not like a like a Marvel blockbuster. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's right there. So it's not too far low down into the indie film era, but it's not too far high up to where it's like 9 digits or higher.
Yeah, I think it's got a similar budget to like Scream 5 or 6, I believe. One of those. So
like the lower budget films, but not like in a way where it's bad. Just more so like a decently budget film, but just on the lower side.
I do believe it got a C on CinemaScore, which
today's day and age isn't that bad.
Isn't that bad, but Rotten Tomatoes audience score 70%. And the critics score 80%, which is funny because the critics actually seem to like it more than the audience.
Yeah.
But that's not really what I've been seeing. Everybody that I've talked to has told me this film is phenomenal. Mutuals of ours said it gave them the same experience that Hereditary gave them, which this person loved Hereditary in the theaters.
So did I, by the way.
Yeah, I think that's what got Marva back into horror.
In general. I had been seeing some horror films from time to time, but I would put it on occasion. Watching Hereditary, I was like, all right, I need to find something that does the same thing, if not better. Let's go.
Right. And then my friend Mark over at KRW / Real to Real Productions, he just went completely over the hills for this movie. He wanted me to go see it. He wanted my thoughts. He wanted Marva's thoughts. And we're here with it, man. So I hate to say it, and I'm just going to get this out there. I'm not saying I don't dislike it. And I'm not saying that I don't love it. But in all honesty, I do think the hype might have hurt me a little bit. Like just a tad. Like,
yeah,
I think I was expecting some like off the wall, unseen, never before horror.
Unhinged.
Yeah, like, and there were some things that were unnerving, but it wasn't something that I haven't seen before. That be it in like a documentary, that be it in another horror film, and yeah, but uh, I guess to give the quick synopsis before I throw it over to Marva, the first Omen is a prequel to the Omen franchise. It predates Omen from I believe 76 or 78, and then also it is the sixth film in the franchise, which I didn't even know there was that many. I imagine the last few aren't canon because I've only ever heard people bring up the first three, and I've only seen the first two. So
Yeah, I
yeah,
didn't even know there was 6.
yeah, I'm not the biggest like Omen guy, and Marva I think has maybe seen like 10 minutes of the first Omen before falling asleep.
Classic.
But before we start breaking this down by like what we liked about it and kind of the unnerving stuff, and by the way, spoilers ahead, so be aware of that. If you haven't seen the movie yet, come back later. But what were your thoughts on the first Omen?
I liked it. I think similar to what you said, because of the fact that I walked in with such high expectations, it kind of shot me. Like, I shot myself in the foot, essentially. Was it bad? No. Is it the greatest horror film I've seen since Hereditary? No. Have I seen anything just as good as Hereditary? I don't think so. And I get it. A lot of people don't find Hereditary all that good now, but at that given point in time, the kind of audience that was watching horror movies went crazy over Hereditary, and Hereditary started a whole movement of that woke horror, or like that more new gen type of horror that we see in the theaters now, or at least we did for a good few years before it transitioned back into more of the paranormal stuff, but on an elevated way.
It was one of the first mainstream, because there had already been elevated stuff like before Hereditary, like the Babadook and things like that. But that was more like
this put it on the map.
Yeah, it was more mainstream.
Not even mainstream, because I think when it first came out and it was first in theaters, it had won the Sundance Festival films. Like, that's literally the only reason why it made it to box offices. That's the prize. That's the grand prize. You go and you make it to the main box offices. And I remember watching the film in the theaters. It was a whole ass experience. Now, mind you, like, the audience members were reacting. I was actually shrinking into my chair. I remember like actually feeling uncomfortable and not liking certain scenes. With this movie, don't get me wrong, I'm not going to say that I'm a stone cold killer and I won't react to certain, like, some of the moments within the movie. There were a lot of moments where like my gut just kind of like twisted itself into a knot. I did feel that unnerving feeling. I did get that weird like hair sticking up on the back of my neck feeling as well while watching this movie, but it wasn't constant. It wasn't consistent. Now who knows? Maybe it might be because of the fact that I haven't seen the other Omen movies before, but at the same time, because of the fact that this is supposed to be a prequel, I would like to think that this movie would hook on the people who haven't seen the franchise yet, and if anything, feed into the ones who've been watching it for years. But I didn't get that feeling. Like, a lot of the scenes, and I think I brought it up to you, and obviously, like you mentioned, we'll dive into more details in just a bit. One of the scenes, or I guess this very specific scene, kind of reminded me of something that I would probably see in American Horror Story. I won't say it's unoriginal, but I won't say it's not something that I have not seen before either.
I think I know what scene you're talking about.
Yeah.
I feel you. I didn't see Hereditary in theaters, so
No.
I didn't judge it based off of my experience with that. I was, I guess, judging it based off like Evil Dead Rise and like
Conjuring.
Smile and other films that I had seen in theaters. Which, by the way, Smile was phenomenal in theaters.
Yeah.
We had a good theater.
I think it added on to the whole experience of the movie.
Yeah. There was one scene though in the theater where I saw, or where we heard, at least I did, like a couple people kind of like, you could hear them shrugging and turning away in the first Omen.
Yeah.
So that was pretty interesting. Didn't happen to me, but
yeah.
some people, and we'll get into the scene we're speaking of in just a second, but there are some things I think people aren't comfortable with, and
which I understand.
Yeah, we get it. But so the movie starts off with a, I guess, current day scene where Father Brennan comes up to Father Harris, and they're discussing some sort of weird conspiracy within the church. Very hush-hush type shit.
Yeah, because you don't even hear, I think, what they're saying. It's just kind of like mumbling.
Yeah, we see the baby picture. The back of it says Skiana, and you don't really see the issue with it, but until, they explain that the baby was created by some unmeans, and then one of the priests doesn't want to tell the other one why because of how crazy it is. And then once they walk out, or actually one of the guys runs out, one of the priests gets killed right then and there.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a pretty cool scene in the sense that I think, was it a Virgin Mary that broke the glass, or was it something else? It was some glass that broke.
I think it was Virgin Mary.
Virgin Mary, right?
Yeah, either that or like the Archangel Michael. One of the two.
The glass breaks, and like you think it's gonna land on the priest that you think it's gonna land on. No, it doesn't. It ends up landing on the other guy who he went to for information, and then slices his head, and you see his brain like pulsing.
Yeah.
And I thought, cool. That was dope. That was a pretty cool opening.
Isn't it played by the same actor who was in Game of Thrones? No.
Game of Thrones, and the who did the one-off in King of Monsters.
Yeah.
Right. Who was looking for I think Ghidorah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I like him as an actor. He's really good.
Yeah.
I think he elevates a lot of stuff that he's in.
He takes his role very seriously, and he brings a level of intensity that I feel like is rather authentic. It doesn't feel like manufactured or fake.
So in Rome, 1971, which I think is supposed to line up with the First Omen, because I think the First Omen ends when he's like 5-ish. Yeah. So that would explain the 1976 tagline there, and then obviously in 71, that's when everything takes place. But we'll get into that in a second. We're introduced to an American Margaret, who I guess is studying to be a nun, right? She's gonna work at the orphanage in Rome, and it's
almost like her final step in her path.
Right. She meets with a cardinal, Father Gabriel, and so on and so forth, and she kind of gets, integrated into her life there. She meets a roommate who loves to party and do all this and that, and at one point, I believe it's mentioned that Margaret, I believe, has visions and a lot of shit that happened to her back in the day that made her become close with the father, right? Who kind of like
brought her there,
brought her back, and then who's the one who brought her there to begin with, like Marva said. We get introduced to Carlita, who is also played by Visions, and her and Margaret right off the bat have a connection. Like, there's something drawing them together. I remember she walks into her room, like... Yeah. I think Carlita licks her, too. Like...
It's really weird. It's a very weird first exchange, because I believe, just like how MJ was talking, it takes a moment for Margaret to kind of get integrated, but once she does, she's fully integrated. And then there's one child who seems to be kind of just off being a loner, not really doing anything, keeping to herself and just drawing, and it's Carlita. Margaret takes the time to go and introduce herself to her, thinking that maybe she just doesn't know or understand English, but it turns out that all the kids actually do and understand English, including Carlita. Right. And shortly after, like what you mentioned, the two of them seem to hit it off. Like, this is the one girl that she has a genuine connection with. The rest of them, it's there, like you see her being nice and everything like that, but this is the one child that she seems to be really stuck on, almost like the motherly instinct comes into play. So seeing that, and then adding on to the fact that, like, a lot of the nuns are taking note that Margaret and Carlita are spending a lot of time together. Like, a lot of the drawings that Carlita is providing Margaret is just, like, too eerie, or it seems a little too familiar to her, even though, like, they seem to have, like, a level of, like, explicit content, or, like... Right. I don't want to say profanity, because it means, like, she's speaking bad, but just more so in the sense of, like, it's not clean. Yeah. And it's all happening in a church, by the way. So it's pretty funny. Like, the Carlita gets pushed off into this room where she's one of the few girls who always goes into what's called, like, the bad room. And it's a very small, stuffy room with, like, a stained mattress. And all she does is just draw on the floor, which what looks like the 9 rings of hell, if you will. Once Margaret takes the time to explore, of course. One thing kind of leads into another, and Margaret seems to be more and more, like, alienated throughout her time in the orphanage, similar to how Carlita is, and kind of like what you touched base on. Margaret goes as far as to tell Carlita, like, hey, like, you remind me of me when I was younger. Like, I was a troubled child. I was always in the corner. I was always being disciplined. Like, you don't have to always listen to what they say. Like, look at me, look at how I turned out now. Like, I'm about to take my vows, so on and so forth. And Carlita seems to take that form of encouragement, and she seems to be functioning more and more on a higher level.
I think at some point, I think you might have skipped over it, but Luis invites, I think that's how you say her name, invites Margaret out to the disco.
Yeah.
They go party. She gets fucked up.
Like drunk.
Really fucked up. She's partying with some dude named Paolo. And what's funny is I believe Paolo and his friend walked up to them.
Yeah.
And they hit it off. And yeah, she gets fucked up and she wakes up the next day having no memory of what happened. But there was this weird, interesting visual with like the spider kind of crawling, and then like she woke up and her hair was all like
all splayed out. You almost get the implication that she may have slept with Paolo, but we don't really know for sure. She also has the whole like morning after experience because this was her first time getting drunk, and so it's a lot of things that are left up for the audience to take the time to interpret, which I kind of liked. What's funny is that at one point when the climax of the movie is building and a lot of the other nuns are turning against Margaret actually runs into Paolo again, and Paolo just is consistently saying like, I'm sorry, I didn't know what they would do, like I apologize, and so on and so forth. And all of a sudden a truck hits him and boom, he's gone. We come to find out that he's apologizing because he was there during a ritual that occurred on that day.
That night, yeah, when she was drunk.
Or that night, excuse me. Like, she was drugged up to the point to where, like, she was just smiling in a very eerie way. In a way that you see all the previous girls in that birthing room smile like.
So, okay. Because we are kind of jumping over something that I want to talk about. After the party, or after she parties, she starts to have visions a lot.
Again. And
one of the big visions that we saw that I think everyone in the theater, like we heard literally shrug and like turn to, their shoulder, like look away, was a birthing scene that showed full on cooch. Yeah. And a hand coming out of it.
And it wasn't a normal hand. It was one of those demonic, long-fingered, long-nailed, black skin, like, no, I can't even say witchy, like literally demonic.
And the way it's building up to it is like it's cutting back from Margaret, looking back to the doctors, back to Margaret, or I don't know who they were, priest or whatever, but it's like jumping back and forth. And then like you're kind of wondering what's happening here. Are they going to go this far? They go that far. But I just wanted to say the reason why I didn't find that scene as unnerving as other people and I could like watch it.
Yeah.
Was because I've seen actual documentaries of pregnancies and I've seen some that are way worse than that, like in real life. So that's why I was just like, I've also seen other movies that show, scenes with birth, and yeah, they don't have hands coming out of it, but it's pretty crazy. So it wasn't something that I was like, oh my God, her legs are up. Oh my gosh, she's screaming. Like it didn't bother me. But like I said, I could hear people. It was silent. All you could hear was the screams on the screen from this woman. Everyone in the theater is silent, but you could hear them like looking away, and I thought that was dope. Like to hear that experience and to be a part of that.
Yeah.
Like, I was like, okay, bravo to this horror movie.
Yeah. MJ's not wrong. You could see it, you could hear it. We even had a friend with us who would turn away, and the idea of pregnancy and like just birthing in general is a concept that a lot of people aren't really comfortable seeing, especially in action. Like, I'll say this much. My father always tells me that once you have a child, you really understand the beauty of it. But I'm also going to say that not everybody has my father's perspective on the circle of life, if you will. So not everybody's going to always be accustomed to it, whether you have a kid or not. Plus, it's like a very intimate act, if you will. So when you see something demonic coming out of a woman who seems to be in a lot of pain, even when pain medications are given to her, it's a lot to take in. Mind you, like I've said before in previous episodes, I am severely desensitized. I, at one point, was like on the dark web watching shit that I really shouldn't be watching. And I've seen documentaries and I've seen different types of horror movies and horror shows to where this concept and this kind of visualization, is it new to me? Was it as detailed? No. Did I feel uncomfortable? Of course. But it wasn't the kind of experience to where it like put fear or like shocked me to my core.
Yeah, no, I feel you on that. And obviously, after this, Father Brendan approaches Margaret. He tries to tell her, like, come to my apartment. I live here. We need to talk about what's happening. Bad things are about to happen. And that's true because right after that happens, we get to see some distance between Carlita and Margaret. And during this course of action, Angelica, and other nun who didn't really speak that much except just kind of laugh here and there.
She's the one without eyebrows.
Yeah, the one without eyebrows. You see her a lot in the trailer and on the posters and stuff. She is talking to Carlita. Margaret approaches them. Carlita drew, like, I guess a woman being imprisoned or like tied up with like a baby inside of her.
Mm-hmm.
And the stick figure had almost like claws, if you will.
Yeah.
And of course, Margaret gets pissed. This is inappropriate. Angelica then kisses her. And she runs upstairs, says, "This is all for you," burns herself alive, and then jumps off the roof and hangs herself. A scene that's eerily familiar to when I believe either the babysitter or the housekeeper of the U.S. ambassador of the First Omen yells out, "This is all for you," for Damien in that film, and hangs herself.
Yeah.
And literally jumps off the house, boom, bangs against the windows just like this woman does in the First Omen. So I thought that was maybe a cool homage. I don't know if that's what they were going for. But...
either that or like, hey, that's not the first person who's gone out of the way to commit suicide, and it's by hanging themselves for this child, for Damien.
Interesting though is that I wonder if that means that none truly believed. I guess in this it's not like a what's the word? Like a sergeant or a soldier of Satan or a believer of Satan. It's more as like they don't really believe in the idea of that. They believe in this film about the church. They want to put the church back in power.
Yeah, so essentially as the plot keeps going down and I know we've kind of gone back and forth, and mind you, MJ and I have only watched this movie once, and I took down notes, mental notes, mind you. I don't know if MJ actually wrote any of them down. But this is definitely a movie that I will take the time to watch again.
Not anytime soon, though.
Yeah, not anytime soon, but I will take the time to watch it again and again. The only reason why I say not anytime soon is because this is a movie that it's not new to me. Mind you, maybe it's just because of the fact that I've seen just so many indie films as of late. So like a lot of indie films also like to push the boundaries and push the edges and push the envelope. I guess kind of playing into that whole concept of elevated horror, if you will. But regardless,
when it releases, we might do a rewatch of it,
and
then jump right into Omen, because I noticed on the wiki it specifies it's a prequel to the Omen film, not the Omen franchise.
Yeah.
Still, it might be like a twofer. Watch the Omen,
and then that's it.
Yeah.
And then if Omen bleeds into the second Omen film, then, or I guess now the third Omen film, then that's a story of its own to tackle. But for now, this is literally what sets up to the movie called The Omen, which was released in the 70s.
Yeah, and that's it. Nothing else.
But like essentially going back to the whole topic of the point, like there's a lot of different things that are happening on the sidelines and building up to the point to where you find out that the church in and of itself is very aware of the connection that Carlita and Margaret have with each other. They're trying to keep them apart. Obviously, that scene that MJ just described right now is played during the era or the moment where the church is trying to keep both Carlita and Margaret away from each other. And once that scene unfolds, Margaret almost gets this fire within her, and she starts looking. We don't know what for, but there just seems to be a motive of her trying to look for something. And she finally comes across these files. And these files are marked as Skiana. That's how you say it? Skiana.
That's how they were saying it.
Well, I mean, it's probably the Italian way, the proper way. So they're marked as Skiana, but it's Skiana 1, Skiana 2, Skiana 3, Skiana 4. Yeah. And we go all the way down to, I think, 11, 12, or 13.
Maybe even more, man.
Yeah, it's like within the double digits where it seems to be more focused on those. But obviously, the more Skianas that we see, the more, I guess, disformed these children are. We come to find out that there's one who's successful, and this is like where the double digits hit. I think it's Skiana 11 or 12. There's another deformity, and then another child is born that is quote unquote normal, or at least like physically. And when Margaret comes across these files, I think there's these nuns, or the scene plays out where like there's a council or a meeting of some sort, or it's maybe like just a small group of nuns talking to each other. And
that was before that scene.
that was before that scene.
Yeah, after the file, she runs straight over to Carlita, and that's when all of them jump her. They're trying to hold her down, and that's where you get the scene where Carlita is screaming, and you see the birthmark under her
mouth. Yeah. So I guess right before Margaret comes across these files, I guess while she's running down and looking for these files, there's a scene where there's like a trio or a small group of leaders or nuns who are talking about how like they're trying to get the offspring to mate with this being to create another offspring, but we don't know exactly what.
We also to mention that at this point, during when she's looking for the files, Louise she's taking her vows.
Yeah.
But there's like this weird scene where
there's
they all
like three or four things happening all at the same time.
They like fall to the floor and they start like chanting, I guess, or praying. Like it was interesting.
Yeah, like essentially the buildup is that like the way that the church is running right now isn't the way that the church should be. Mind you, in the beginning of the film altogether, there's this undertone that the current society seems to have a lot of doubt within the church, and the church wants to eradicate that, and they're very aware of it. The protesters, just the amount of people who are turning to the church in general, the current generation, like it's a constant undertone of the film where like the cardinal's bringing it up, or like the head mother is bringing it up, or just all the other nuns are bringing it up. So bring in the scene of Margaret finding the files, the nuns talking about how like they need to make sure the offspring breeds with the father to then create another offspring, almost implicating incest. Not almost, is implicating incest. And then there's also Louise taking her vows and falling to the floor, and a whole ceremony of like people making themselves look like crosses and just praying, but not in the sense of like a good type of praying. It's almost like a chanting. It looks very cult-like.
Yeah.
By the time that Margaret goes up to find Carlita, like you mentioned, that's where all the nuns are trying to keep the two of them separated. Carlita screams and her mouth is like wide open, and you see her birthmark being the 666 up in her mouth. So that's when Margaret's is in the bedroom. She still somehow has the files with her. I don't know how. Eventually,
she doesn't have the files. She leaves them under the bed. Father Gabriel comes to free her. But this is also like during the scene where she has like that crazy vision of Angelica like burned alive. Like it was interesting.
It was like her corpse come back to life just to kind of like laugh and do certain things.
I think that might be one of the few times in a theatrical film, not documentary or indie shit, that I had seen like a full-fledged burned body victim.
Corpse.
Yeah, like just walking around like it was pretty detailed.
It looked real and it looked fresh. It looked like as if like her body was taken off the rope, because she even had that like slight twitch in her neck where people who've broken their neck have that kind of crick or that twitch. So they took all that aspects into play and they put it in front of you. Mind you, the burns almost make it seem like she's wearing one of the nun's dresses, but you can tell when the camera gets closer and closer that no, it's just her scars. It's just the fact that like her skin's severely burnt, or like the clothes have melted with her skin, or however hot the temperature was.
Father Gabriel and Margaret then run over to Father Brennan, where they start going through the files. They discover that no, it cannot be her, because this baby...
By her, MJ means Carlita.
Carlita cannot be the whatever that, because her birthmark is in her mouth, and the one they're looking for has a birthmark on her head.
Exactly.
This then unfolds into a huge vision / flashback / flash forward of her being the Antichrist.
Margaret.
And she then, it shows everything. Like the beast possibly mating with her. We see a flashback to like Paolo and her and his homeboy in the ritual with the other nuns and priests, and it was a very insane scene. And
so once
props to the actress, man, for like really conveying that.
She did a good job. So once everything clicked for Margaret. Like kind of like what MJ said, like all the different visions came together. Margaret finally remembered exactly what happened to her that night. It's implicated that there's this beast that's living in the chambers within the church that Margaret's is at, and this beast like came and impregnated her or stayed her, however you decide to interpret that or take it or want to call it, I guess, if you will. I'm again not going to put the label on it. I'm going to leave it up to you guys to decide what that is. That all that happens, and like MJ said, like Paolo's there in the crowd, Luis is there in the crowd, so like it seems like everybody within the movie was involved and very aware of Margaret's role, besides Margaret. So eventually, I guess it's Gabriel, Brennan, and like a few others who are in the car along with Margaret and Carlita, who are trying to leave, and then nuns and a few other different like official folk from the church are driving around trying to get them, and they crash into the car, T-bone it. Margaret gets out of the car, has this whole episodic scene of like seizing and liquid coming out of her, and all of a sudden you see like a very small, flat-stomached woman turn into a 9-month
Pregnant woman
who's ready to give birth at any moment in time. And like, mind you, the way that her body is seizing and convulsing is not a pleasant thing to see at all.
Again, shout out to the actress, because
she did a very good job.
I had even thought the scene went on a little too long of her doing that.
Yeah.
But again, shout out to the actress. No matter what my opinion is on it, she fucking killed it.
Yeah.
And it was just her in that scene, and she was
only her.
And she was just going off, bro. Like
MJ has his opinion about thinking that maybe they could have kept the scene a whole lot shorter. I think they did it at exactly the right amount of time, because it was long enough to where you felt that level of being uncomfortable. You could tell that she was in pain. You could tell that she was being taken over, but also fighting the fact that she was being taken over. Like, it wasn't a full takeover. However, at the same time, like, something beyond, I guess, normal circumstances was playing out for her. So there's like the actress really did a good job of embodying the pain, the fear, the moments of possession, all those different types of emotions within that few minute scene. And it was a moment where like I genuinely felt uncomfortable, which is very difficult to do, especially whenever it comes to movies and like horror movies in general.
Yeah. I think after that they pull up, they take her, she awakes in, I guess, like the dungeon / basement /
birthing room, I guess,
whatever you want to call it. She ends up giving birth. Cardinal Lawrence is there, the one who was befriended her when she was younger and then brought her to Rome. He's, I guess, the head of the conspiracy, the head of the cult.
Not just that, he also admits to Margaret at some point in time while she's about to give birth that he has known that she essentially would be the reason, or like she had a big role to play in bringing all the believers back, which then ties back into that undertone that the movie carries, that the church seems to be playing a part in this whole fiasco.
Right.
But it seems like as if they are hoping that the birth of this Antichrist, or this child that they've been waiting for and trying for so many years, because mind you, whenever Margaret's in labor and trying to give birth, everybody in there is hoping for a boy to come out. And no matter what, no matter how many times they've tried, it's always been a girl. A girl has always been birth. However, They had known that the later generations would eventually result into a boy. They just didn't know who.
That's where it led to the whole, it needs to be, the devil needs to mate
with one of its own
offspring to create the boy. So,
exactly.
Yeah.
Which it already had been. Like, that beast already had been mating, but I guess it just had to be the right one. And apparently Margaret was the right one, because she gave birth not just to one child, to twins, and one was a girl and one was a boy. The church celebrated and everything, and Margaret, being the beast that she was after giving birth, this kills the cardinal with one of the scalpels and so on and so forth. But once the child is born and the sun is out, like, the cardinal, along with the rest of the nuns and the higher ups, are constantly saying, like, praise be, like, we finally have him. Like, we knew that Margaret would be the one, or it was either going to be Margaret or Carlita, but at this point in time in the movie, they've also factored out Carlita because she's just a little too young.
Yeah.
So now the main focus is just only and solely on Margaret. So once that all happens, I guess that's where the church truly turns against Margaret, sets the whole place on fire, is ready to leave her newborn daughter there, but they took the son. And
keep in mind, before that happened, they actually were going to be cool with her. She even said that, like, the son needs a mother.
Yeah.
And she kind of took advantage of that.
That's when she killed the cardinal.
Yeah, she kills the cardinal, and then that's when everyone turns against her which I only wanted to bring that up and correct you because that might be a big factor later.
No, it's true.
Because
I didn't want to gloss over that.
Yeah, because the son needing the mother, and obviously in the Omen, it's a spoiler for anyone who hasn't seen it yet. Sorry, Marva, but
it's fine.
Damien does get left on his own.
Yeah.
So that is the ending of movie 1, and now with the knowledge that he has a sister and a mother still.
Yeah.
I could see why they may want to retcon their sequel to Omen and do their own Omen too. Yeah. You know, but regardless of all that stuff, that the place gets set on fire, which I thought this was kind of funny. I get it was supposed to be like a very creepy and dramatic scene, but seeing the beast burning alive, I just thought was very comical because
it was like a whole ass reveal, man. Like the whole room's burning, and then all of a sudden this curtain's burning, and mind you, this curtain is showing of like a demonic creature with its mouth open and a woman like being either inhaled or crawling out, depending on your interpretation. Curtains fall. Lo and behold, it's the beast that we see in the SA scene. And it's burning alive.
I thought they had to summon him.
I know. But honestly, I didn't think they had him on deck like that. I thought that they would be like some crazy ass chant or some like weird dance or some sort of sacrifice, and all of a sudden this beast comes out and essays one of his own kids and goes down his merry way. No, he was just there. He was chilling. He was probably having conversations with the cardinal and the nuns. I shit you not. Just be like, all right, well, what's going on this Tuesday? Which one am I touching?
That's fucked up, bro.
I mean, think about it.
I mean, that does make the whole movie even creepier.
100%.
There's this orphanage with all these girls, and yet this
young girls, mind you, young girls.
And this freaking beast.
The oldest one is Carlita.
And this freaking beast is just down there fucking things, bro. Like it's just that's creepy.
That's nasty as fuck. But that also goes, and I think I told you this whenever we were walking out of the theater. This movie really plays on the fact of how just fucked up the church can be, just to make sure it has enough followings.
Yeah. And so Carlita,
literally or metaphorically, however you decide to interpret that.
Carlita and the daughter and Margaret end up leaving. Some time passes. We are then in America, where we see the baby boy is given to the American diplomat or the U.S. ambassador, Robert Thorne, who is the main character of the First Omen film.
Didn't you tell me they took a scene exactly from the First Omen film too?
It looked like it. Yeah, they either recreated it or they upscaled it, but it looked almost exactly like the scene from the First Omen. And then more time passed years later, where I believe the daughter is probably around the age of what the boy would be,
like 4
or 5. Yeah, where the First Omen takes place. Father Brennan appears. He's still alive after the car crash.
Surprise, surprise.
And he warns Margaret and the daughters that the conspirators, the cult, the church, are going to be hunting her. And he reveals at the final line of the entire movie that her son has a name, and it's Damien.
Yeah.
So.
And that's when the movie finally ends.
Yeah, that this movie had like 3 different endings or 4 different endings.
It had different moments to where it could end. So at one point, I thought the movie was going to end around like the fire scene, but that didn't happen. And then I thought it was going to end around the hospital scene, whenever you see the son being handed off to the ambassador. Yeah. And then I thought it was going to end around Brenner, like the door opening to Brenner. That didn't happen. Instead, it ended after Margaret finding out that her son's name is Damien. Like, hey, hello, your son's still alive. I know you and your daughter aren't supposed to be here, and your daughter/niece, granddaughter/niece. I don't fucking know how that would work. I'm not gonna try and make sense of that. That's some Alabama shit.
I even thought the scene could have ended with the vision of her being the Antichrist.
Like, yeah, with everything coming into play.
Yeah, with all the visions finally making sense. I could have imagined like she's like pulling her hair to reveal the 666, like, and then like we see the top of her head and it says 666 and it zooms out and then she kind of goes like that, and then you get cut directed by. I thought that could have been
credits rolling.
Yeah, that could have been an ending right then and
so
there.
I guess 5 endings right there.
Yeah, there's a lot that went into this, but the movie was only like 120 minutes. So
technically 2 hours,
which is like pretty bare bones in the era where movies can be 4 hours long.
Yeah, a lot of movies are at least 2:15, 2.5. This one's like at the 2 hour mark. But mind you, like I know both MJ and I kind of touched on base about the fact that this movie could have multiple different points to where it could end. However, it didn't feel like as if the ending is dragging on either. It was still enjoyable. Yeah. Or at least for me. I thought it was well placed and well timed and well mannered, and while I was expecting an ending, it wasn't like I was waiting for it.
I think I would give this movie like a 6.5 out of 10.
I was gonna give it a 7.
Yeah.
But then again, I'm also a girl, and I'm also afraid of births and pregnancies, and this movie seemed to really be like focused on that. So I'm gonna put that into it. Or at least I was born with a vagina. Let me rephrase that.
Quote Marva.
Yes.
I was born with the vagina.
So that's why I'm afraid of birthing in general. However, if you were not, you can also be afraid of birthing and not be born with a vagina. So there's that too.
I think on a good day, I'll probably give this movie a 7 out of 10. I will say, I don't know how to fully pronounce her names or their names, so I might be wrong on this. Urkasha Stevenson, this was her film directorial debut. I believe she did some TV shows, but I could be wrong. At least that's what Twitter tells me. And yeah, I mean, I've seen people praise her directing. Their shots were phenomenal. I mean, they even took a scene that we see all the time on TikTok, the clothes being a figure, right? And did something different with it.
That shit scared me, dude. And
jumped.
You made fun of me for that. And before we close it off, I'm just gonna end it on this. This movie did a very good job of keeping me guessing as far as those traditional jump scares goes. And that was something else that you and I also talked about shortly after walking out of the movie theaters. It played and was aware of the traditional jump scares that most people tend to fall for and most horror movies tend to do, be it current, be it 10 years ago, be it 20 years ago, 30 years ago.
Like the 1, 2, 3 beat,
exactly.
Right? Yeah.
Or even like the 1, 2, 3, 4 beat. This one made it a 5, 6, 7, 8, depending on which kind of scene it was playing. Because in all honesty, and I think I told you this in the car, I'm just going to keep it on the TDLR because we're closing out soon. I was waiting for a good 5 to 15, like not 5, 15 to 30 seconds for this scene to finish. I was like, all right, now it's going to happen. Now it's going to happen. This is the perfect moment. Look. I can see the figure. No, it's not a full figure. It's just the clothes, right? Right when I put my guard down and I have 3 different conversations happening in my head, trying to convince myself that everything's going to be fine, that's when the jump scare happens. And that's when I freak the fuck out. And I told myself in my head, look at it. Look at you. You dumbass. You should have kept your guard up the entire fucking time. And the thing is, and I don't jump like that. I actually jumped to the point that I couldn't feel my ass on the chair for a quick moment. I don't even know how that happened. It was fucking hilarious.
It was hilarious.
But I loved it. I was like, fuck, I'm stupid. But let's keep watching. If this happened once, let me see if it'll happen again. Now I know, never let my guard down for this film. Because I honestly thought at this point in time in the movie that maybe this film would be a little bit too traditional as far as the horror movie experience goes. But that given moment right there, which is, mind you, like 15, 20 minutes into the film, completely changed my perspective and had me hooked, ready for the next scare.
Yeah. This, I think, like you said, nailed all the boxes. And that's why I said, I think on a good day, I'll give it like a 7 out of 10. But it's not like something that I would even consider like in my top 10 horror movies of like the last decade.
Top 20.
Yeah. I will say what's funny is that Mark brought this up to me, and that was the fact that this does fall under the new Disney era of horror properties under Fox. So, I mean, shout out to them for, I guess, getting 1, 2 so far with Prey, and now this one. The next one coming up is Alien. So
Disney's involved in horror movies now. Interesting.
Because they own Fox now. So,
I know. Disney.
Yeah, I mean,
what the non-monopoly company.
So they got 2 bangers so far with Prey and this one.
Yeah, as far as like
Prey was really fucking good. I want to do a review on that.
I would love to watch it again and then do a review on it in honesty, because I think that movie got me intrigued with Predator altogether. And I think that's what caused me and you to sit down and watch it all the way either to Predator 2 or Predator 3. I don't remember.
Predator 2 probably.
So.
I will say one last thing before we close out. The one cool thing about this movie is because the word of mouth was so good, maybe even if the money doesn't fully reflect it, the word of mouth was amazing. I've seen nothing but praise for it. That I can imagine when the sequel comes out to this movie, which might be like the Omen 3 technically, like the third Omen film of this new timeline, if you will.
Yeah, technically, because it falls back onto the Omen that came out in the 70s. So.
Yeah, so it would be this one, the first Omen from the 70s, and then
movie coming up, that one that we're talking about in the abstract sense.
I can imagine that doing phenomenal numbers.
Yeah,
like I feel like that's gonna be where we'll see like the real clutch of this, and I can't wait. I hope we get an announcement of them with this in the works soon. Like, I would.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind watching it. Just like you said, like it's a movie that I'm not sitting here praising and going crazy for, but it's definitely a movie and a franchise that I wouldn't mind following. And who knows, maybe like with a bigger budget, they'll do even crazier shit, and then I'll like it even more.
Disney, sign me a check, cut me a check. The Omen Awakening, June 6, 2026.
I'll keep the 666 in there. Yeah,
cut me a check, Disney.
They were always playing with that in this movie. Let's do it. I'm
June
down.
6, 2026, bro.
Yeah,
that's
his
the
idea.
That's the way to do it right there.
And
yeah.
I'm gonna keep my mouth shut. If it ends up being the case, then you might be a time traveler.
Anyways, this was our review of the First Omen. Go follow us on /and-sync over on Instagram. Links down below in the description. You can also find it on our official podcaster page. We're going to be reviewing some of the smaller form things there. Hey, we may even watch The Omen soon and just kind of do a quick little review on that on Instagram. But yeah, go check us out. Thank you to Marva for joining me as always.
Always. I think the next one we're going to be talking about Scream. Like movies 1 through 4 though?
Yeah, movies 1 through 4, and then we're gonna do 5 and 6 at a later date.
Yeah, not just because of the current, I guess, scandal behind 5 and 6, but just overall, because I feel like 1 through 4 carries its own note, and then 5 and 6 kind of has its own note.
Yeah, no, for sure. But let us know what you think of the First Omen. I'll leave a poll there as well. Also, how does the First Omen rank up to you in terms of other horror movies that have come out in the last couple of years? That'll be the question for this official episode. Anyways, guys, thank you for tuning in. Next time.